After my divorce, I moved to the outskirts of the city, quiet, scenic, isolated. I told everyone it was for peace. But really, I was running from noise, my ex-husband's lies, the echo of my so-called best friend's voice, and the laughter they thought I'd never hear. I wanted silence, even if it meant drowning in it. That's when Stefan came into the picture. My new driver, tall, clean-cut, eyes that didn't wander, polite to a fault. He barely spoke unless spoken to. Always. In pressed shirts, never late, never loud. There was something military about his composure, something deeply restrained. He was, by every stretch, straight and serious. At first, I thought nothing of him. He was just a part of the new routine, one I had full control over. But little things started pulling at me. The way he opened the door before I even reached for the handle. How he adjusted the mirror every single time, even when it didn't need adjusting. How he kept his gaze forward, even when I was on the phone crying silently in the back seat. I was lonely, and the worst kind of lonely is the one where you're surrounded by comfort but feel cold all the time. Stefan never flirted. He never crossed a line. Maybe that's what drew me in. He didn't want anything from me. One rainy evening, after a dinner at a friend's place, we drove back in near silence. The rain tapped rhythmically on the roof, the windshield wipers sweeping like a heartbeat. I sat behind him, watching the raindrops race across the glass. For some reason, that night felt heavier. My hands were cold, and without a word, he turned on the heat and offered me his jacket. It smelled like fresh laundry and pine trees. When we pulled into the driveway, I thanked him quietly. He didn't reply, he only nodded. I opened the car. Doran stepped out, but the ground was slick. My heel twisted and I stumbled. Before I could fall, his hand gripped my waist and pulled me close. Firm, warm, immediate. There was a pause. His hand didn't drop right away. My breath caught. He looked down at me just once before letting go, muttering, "Careful, ma'am." I smiled awkwardly. "Thanks, Stefan." He stepped back, nodded again, and returned to the driver's seat like nothing had happened. But something had. Inside the house, I dropped the jacket on the couch and leaned against the door. My heart was racing, and I hated that it was. I reminded myself, he's your driver, he's straight, he's engaged. This isn't a romance novel. But still, the way he looked at me when I slipped, it wasn't empty. It wasn't nothing. And nothing had started to feel like everything. After that night, I thought things would go back to normal. But they didn't. At least, not for me. I started noticing more. How Stefan would glance at me through the rear view mirror when he thought I wasn't looking. How his grip on the steering wheel tightened when I laughed at something on my phone. How he paused before answering when I asked about his weekend. He still hadn't said much. But silence can speak, and lately, his was saying too much. On a Thursday afternoon, we were stuck in traffic coming back from the city. The car idled, heat humming softly. I broke the quiet with a joke about the chaos of my old life, about how even traffic felt safer than my marriage ever did. He surprised me by laughing. A real laugh, not forced or polite, just warm and low. "You don't talk much," I said, half teasing. "Not much to say, ma'am," he replied, but this time he glanced at me. His eyes lingered for a second too long. Then he looked back, at the road. "Are you always this guarded?" He hesitated. Some things are easier not to feel. I didn't ask what he meant. I was afraid if I did, I'd open something neither of us was ready for. That night, the wind was howling as we drove back from a late appointment. He seemed tense, jaw clenched, eyes locked ahead. I asked softly, "Everything okay?" "My fiancée," he said after a long pause. "She says I'm distant. Maybe she's right. I don't know what I feel anymore." My heart beat faster. This was new, raw, real. We turned off the main road to take a shortcut through the woods. The trees were tall, leaning over like they wanted to hear our conversation, too. The road narrowed, and he slowed the car to a stop near a clearing. No traffic, no lights, just us. I turned slightly in my seat to face him. "You're not like anyone I've met." He looked down, then slowly turned toward me. "You're not supposed to say that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what I'd say back." The car was silent except for the wind and the soft purr of the engine. Then he reached across slowly. Not in a rush, not with hunger, but with something restrained. He placed his hand gently on my arm and said, "You're cold." "I'm fine," I whispered, but I wasn't. Suddenly he moved, quick but careful. In one swift motion, he leaned over and pushed me down onto the seat, holding me there. Not to dominate, but to shield. His face hovered above mine. "Don't look at me like that," he murmured. "Like what?" I whispered. "Like I'm something I'm not." Our breaths mingled inches apart. For a moment I thought he might kiss me, but he didn't. He looked at me with something like pain in his eyes, then sat upright, put the car in drive, and said nothing for the rest of the trip, and I couldn't stop shaking. After that night in the woods, a silence settled between us, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that dripped tension like a leaking faucet. Stefan stopped looking at me in the mirror. He opened doors like a robot, expressionless, distant. He didn't ask if I was cold anymore. He didn't laugh at my jokes, and he never brought up what happened. Neither did I. But I felt the change, deep and aching. Something between us had shifted, and now we were both pretending it hadn't. Week passed, then another. I learned through a neighbor that Stefan's fiancée had been seen crying at a cafe downtown. A waitress mentioned a quiet argument, a ring being slid off and dropped into a purse. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. I felt guilt. Heavy, suffocating guilt. One evening, I asked Stefan to come in for coffee after a long drive. He hesitated at the door, his jaw tight. Then he shook his head. "I shouldn't." "Please," I said softly. "Just a few minutes." Inside, the silence followed us. I handed him a mug. He didn't drink. He stood near the fireplace, back to me. "I never meant for things to get complicated," I said, voice low. "I don't even know what we are." "We're nothing," he replied too quickly, too harshly. Then he sighed. "I mean, we can't be anything." I stepped closer. "Because of her?" He shook his head. "Because of me." That's when he told me the truth. Quietly, like confessing a sin. Years ago, before he met his fiancée, he'd fallen in love. Deeply. Honestly, it was with a man. His best friend. Someone who died in a car accident on a rainy night not unlike the one we shared. He never told anyone. Buried it. Thought if he pushed forward, got engaged, got a job, followed the rules, he could make it all disappear. "I've been driving in circles ever since," he said. "And then, you." He looked at me, eyes wide open for the first time. Vulnerable. Torn. "I don't know what I feel around you. I don't even know what to call it. But I haven't felt anything in years. And now I do. And it scares the hell out of me." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My heart was breaking, not because of rejection, but because I understood. We were both wounded, hiding behind appearances, clinging to the idea of safety. He stepped back, placing the untouched mug on the table. "This isn't your fault, but I can't be what you want. I don't even know if I can be what I want." He left without another word. I stood in the hallway long after the door clicked shut, surrounded by shadows. That night, I realized something devastating. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from someone else. Sometimes it's the lies we tell ourselves to survive. Days blurred into one another. I stopped requesting Stefan for my drives. Not out of anger, not because of rejection, but because seeing him was like pressing on a bruise. It hurt too much. I started walking more, alone. Through the gardens behind the estate. Through the narrow streets where no one knew my name. I needed distance, but every corner seemed to echo with him, his silence, his warmth, his restraint. Then one afternoon, just as spring kissed the air, there he was, parked in front of my house leaning against the car. Not in uniform, just jeans and a plain navy sweater. Hands in his pockets, eyes uncertain. "I thought you weren't coming anymore," I said, standing in the doorway. "I shouldn't have come," he replied, "but I couldn't stay away either." We stood there for a moment, the kind of pause that only people with unfinished things between them can create. "I left my fiancé," he said quietly. I blinked. "Because of me?" "No," he said. "Because of me. I've been lying to her, lying to myself. You just reminded me of the truth I buried." I stepped out, down the porch steps, until I stood a few feet from him. "And what is that truth, Stefan?" He looked away, then back again. "That love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, complicated, scary, but real." I took a breath. "So what do we do now? Are we a mistake? A secret?" "No," he said softly. "We're a beginning, if you'll let it be one." It wasn't a grand confession. There were no fireworks, no cinematic kiss, just two people, standing in the raw aftermath of their truths, stripped of illusions. We didn't promise each other forever. We didn't even promise tomorrow, but we shared something real, an understanding, a peace. Stefan didn't quit being a driver, but he no longer drove for me. We kept our connection outside the car, away from leather seats and blurred reflections. We met as equals, not roles. And slowly, I learned that betrayal isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's necessary. Betraying. Old versions of ourselves, old expectations, old lies. The world didn't cheer for us. Some whispered, some judged, but we didn't live for them anymore. I used to think my story would end in heartbreak, that the best I could hope for was a quiet life built from ruins. But I was wrong. Because sometimes, the person you think is off limits becomes the one who finally sees you. And sometimes the man who says he's straight ends up being the one who drives you straight into the truth.